duality and creating a collective, powerful mindset, culture drivers are the real MVPs. From recruiting practices to retention and inclusion, they facilitate discussions around mentorship, sponsorship and affinity groups, and put in place a set of measures to guarantee that women have proper role models that they can look up to. Today, we assemble a panel with some of the MVPs in this endeavor. Hold your applause until the end and help me welcome Martha Ventura from T-Mobile, Virginia Martinez from IDEO, Caroline Winnet from Berkeley Skydeck, Patrick Ford from Allies at Work, and our lovely moderator, Nicole Sanchez from VIA Consulting.
Hello, it's nice to be back in this room. You have my esteemed co-panelists' bios in hard copy, so we're not gonna bore you with that. Not that we're all boring. We're very exciting people, I promise. But you can read that. Before we get going, we were asked for a fun fact. I think varying levels of fun is also a great point of diversity, what you consider fun. Because I had to work really, really hard to think of something that sounded fun, and I realized I'm like the most unfun person ever. Tell us about Python real quick, and we'll warm up.
Well, for those who don't know me, this might not sound fun, but it is surprising for those who know me well that this would be one of my joys, given that other parts of me are not as analytical.
Great.
So the unexpected thing about my fun fact is actually it was fun. I know this sounds crazy, but it was, and it's probably like childbirth looking back on it. I think, oh, it was great. But took a little bit longer. But I highly recommend it, and my takeaway for all of you is that really, if you're a basic sound body and you have a beast of a mind to do stuff, which you probably all do because you're in this room, you too can do an Ironman.
I'm sorry that no. All right, fun fact.
Yeah, with crossword puzzles, and I love them, and I'm usually doing them on my commute. And if someone's like, "Oh, I do crossword puzzles too," and I can't help myself, I'm like, "How fast do you finish a Monday?" You know, like, and if you folks are laughing because you know, like, they get harder as you move throughout the week. So Monday's the easiest, and like, I love, like, my best record time is like 6 minutes 43 seconds. So like, yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else?
And Martha.
So my fun fact, I debated whether I would put it up there because I thought, how many people are going to remember a Ford Pinto? Do any of you know what that is? Okay, some do. Okay, good. And yeah, my first car was a pink Ford Pinto. And it really struck me back then, I was 15 and a half, 16 years old, and it was the biggest deal in the world to me, not in a good way, that I was driving a pink Ford Pinto. So my first paycheck, right, I painted it. And I think now, I'm so much further along in my growth, I wouldn't care if I had a pink Ford Pinto.
That's right. That sounds awesome. A Pinto sounds awesome. The pink Pinto sounds over the top. This is great. I want to thank Dr. McCrae because she gave us a little bit of extra time to have folks give you a little bit of a deeper introduction about themselves, because I was also going to start with Kimberly Crenshaw, just so that we can make sure that we understand where the term intersectionality comes from. And now that you can see us as complete humans for all the interesting myriad ways we show up here, we're going to get into a little bit about what we all work on and how we specifically try and keep intersectionality front and center in the work that we do. I know that it's something that I've been very cognizant of over my 25 years of being a D&I practitioner. And we are all practitioners in one way or another. So we really want to get into the nitty-gritty of some of the hows stuff shows up. I know where you wanted to take those questions for Dr. McCrae is hopefully where we can pick up and give you some more stuff to really sink your teeth into, to think I have some tools and some frameworks to go back into my workplace and think about how I'm going to, or school, think about how I'm going to champion these issues other than just using my own identity. So as a D&I practitioner, or DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, whatever we're using this year, it's been a long career. We used to just say multiculturalism, and that was it, and it's a terribly limited word. But wherever we are right now, I think there are two things that are true. For those of us who are clearly from backgrounds that are underrepresented in the context in which we're sitting, which can be a business school, it can be a tech company, it can be what have you, we know intuitively what bad DEI feels like, or no DEI. The problem is this: we are often looked at as the people who also have the answers, when we don't necessarily have the answers. We can articulate the problem, and we can say, here's what hurts. You know, you go to the doctor, ¿dónde duele? It hurts right here. There's something wrong right here. I don't know, that guy keeps looking at me weird. It hurts here, right? But that isn't fair, not only to diversity and inclusion practitioners, but certainly to the folks who bear that expectation that you somehow, because of the way that you present yourself in the world, must know a lot about DEI. And the number one thing I learned when coming into this field, which wasn't really a field when I started working in it, was people just wanted to do the jobs they were hired to do. People from all backgrounds. And some of us wanted to peel off and go work on this other thing. So black women who are engineers, the number one thing I hear from them is, please stop asking me to be on diversity panels. I just want to be an engineer, right? I came here to write code and to ship product. And so I think, and I'm going to kind of speak for the other practitioners on the panel for a second, part of our job in the workplace and in schools and in other communities is to relieve that burden so that the folks who are from underrepresented backgrounds in particular can go back to doing the thing they love and do it well without the additional burden and emotional labor that we've been carrying with us everywhere we go. So this is an important framework, I think, as we go into a conversation from people who do this actively every day. I want you to think about that a little bit, that this is actually a profession and a burgeoning field that I maintain will be a vertical inside a company, just like finance, just like legal, just like product, just like sales. You will have the vertical that is resourced appropriately and driven by all the things that the other verticals are driven by. And so that's where we start. I'm going to start on, thanks. I'm going to start down here with Martha. And I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about how you think about intersectionality as you go into your work.
Great. Briefly on that, it's something that it's hard to explain. And I'll start with, I'm sorry, I know you said briefly, but what you said really struck me, because when I was asked to be on this panel, I thought, well, why me? I'm not in the HR department. I am not in our diversity and inclusion stream. I'm an engineer. That's what I do, right? But as I thought about it, I thought, but I'm also a leader in my organization, and so I am in the diversity and inclusion. You know, whether I'm in that department or not, it is part of my job. It should be part of my job. And I'm here to kind of share my personal experience, not an academic experience. I haven't been trained in this. I don't have that expertise, but I'm going to share my personal experience. So around intersectionality, for me, it's, you know, the realization that, you know, the different parts of who I am are all interconnected. I'm a woman, I'm a Latina. I am overweight, which is something that's not talked about. It's one of the things that was up on the screen, and we're still very shy, or, you know, we don't talk about that, right? And there's probably a couple more up there as well that intersect for me. And that not one of those things defines me and is my whole experience. It's all of that together and connected. And I kind of always knew that in my heart. I just couldn't put words to it until this idea of intersectionality came out. Like, yes, of course, that's what I've been feeling, and it kind of gave me the language to be able to talk about that. But that's what it means to me. Sorry.
Thank you so much. Let's go straight down the panel.
Okay, great. I really also love that slide where it has sort of the different things, because for me, intersectionality is uniqueness, and yes, in the warm and fuzzy ways of the way that makes everyone an individual and special, but also that what I experience will not be what you experience, and I can't assume that, you know, the same thing, that just because we have two Latino last names, that like we're gonna have the same experiences. And just my own personal story, like do folks know what the word code switch means, or the term? Okay, most nodding. Show of hands if you don't.
It's
It's okay. It's okay.
Don't,
yeah,
don't
yeah,
be
yeah,
afraid.
yeah,
All right,
yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
Code switching.
No, that's great.
Quick lesson.
So very quickly, and I'm going to oversimplify it, but this idea that like you can behave or speak or be someone in one group, and then you switch, and then you might even use different language or present or behave a different way because that's how you think you need to show up. And when I learned this term, like it really like confused me because it always, people talk about it as like, I was code switching, like as if something does it. But growing up, first generation, my parents are immigrants. We did not grow up with a lot of money. And yet I get it. Like I'm very white. Like I get that. But people chose to sort of code switch for me. So like a lot of things like, oh, you probably got into that school because, of your last name.
Damn it! Not this week.
Yeah.
Hi, oh, yes, thank you for saying that.
Like even this happened the other night, and people say it very sort of, they think they're well-intentioned, but like some song came on and I like start dancing, merengue, and they're like, okay, stop pretending, they say to me. And I'm like, wait a minute, where? So this has been really interesting for me in intersectionality, where like people are choosing like how they want to see me, their codes, like they're like forcing their own switch on me. So that's my story.
That shows up, that's how it shows up. Iron Man woman.
Okay. Iron person.
Iron person, that's the best.
Yes. We're all iron people here.
Iron person.
All right. I'll talk about it in two ways, personally and in my day-to-day work. And in my day-to-day work, I run a startup accelerator. You all know what's going on in the startup industry, right? Don't have to summarize that. Intersectionality is opportunity. If we can see and bring and encourage and nurture people of color, women of color, people who barely speak English, not legal status, all those things up there, we have a shot at finding all of the talent and not just the ones that look like the ones that Silicon Valley typically looks for. So we try very hard, and this is very much a Berkeley value, so fortunately it's something that's baked into the culture here. And I personally try very hard that anytime an application comes in or a founder comes in and they don't look like the typical hoodie white guy, we're taking an extra hard look, right? Because maybe there's great talent there, but it's not quite ready to come out, or it's a little unsure of itself, needs a little more encouragement. And I wouldn't say we've moved the needle dramatically yet at Skydeck, but we hope to, very much. So I see intersectionality as opportunity in a positive way. There's lots of other negative things about it, but I like to think about that sometimes. For me personally, it's been fascinating. So as a white, straight female, born here, speaks English, legal status, most of that stuff up there, I don't think about it. But of course, think about being female. But it's been interesting to see the change in my own personal view of age. So as a young woman with blonde hair, there was a certain issue that I dealt with. Many great things about getting older, so many great things, and I tell young women all the time, there's so many great things about getting old. The biggest one being you give far fewer you-know-whats about many things, as we just heard, which is fabulous. But there's actually an intersection of two industries with what I do. So I run a startup accelerator. Startups, Silicon Valley, investors, right? That's one type of culture, but I work at UC Berkeley. That's a totally different type of culture in many ways. And in the first culture, in the startup culture, age is a hindrance. The older you get, you're not as important, you're not as credible. We're looking for young people. In academic world, that's not the case. It's wonderfully open, the academic world, to people of later age. So I try to go between those two and take the best of both.
Now we're going to hear from Patrick Ford. Okay, I'm going to first address the elephant in the room. We've got a white guy on our panel.
Take it away.
Patrick Ford is one of my former students who did very well in my class on diversity in the workplace. And I want you to answer the question about intersectionality first, and then I'm going to ask you what you and I talked about before about the white guy question. So
Yes.
We'll go there. Okay.
I don't remember who told me, but somebody said diversity is diverse, and that means a lot of things, but some of the ways that I take it, especially in terms of intersectionality, is people are so unique, and that what I've learned and what I'm constantly learning being a white, heterosexual, cisgender, middle-class guy doing work in diversity, equity, inclusion is to like just never make any assumptions, ever. To be open to a growing and broader range of possibilities of who people are and who they want to be and their hopes and dreams, but never to think that that doing this work helps me figure people out. It helps me to be more open-minded. And in a really practical sense, in terms of intersectionality, it really helps me to steer away from white feminism, basically. That the work that I do in terms of trying to engage men, white people, heterosexual people in the workplace on these issues, that the truth is it's easy for me to fall into white women, men of color, straight people, if I'm not paying attention. And so with the educational work I do, I try to always think about putting like women of color first. Like, who's the image? Women of color. Like, what is the research? Let's put the research about women of color first. Yeah.
That's great. And then you were going to talk a little bit about the framework you use being a white man doing
Yeah.
diversity, a straight, white, cis, et cetera,
Yeah.
doing work in this space.
So when I'm teaching people, and I try to start out my workshops because engaging people as leaders and as students of their own learning, because the 90-minute or 2-hour workshop is never, ever, ever going to be enough, and sometimes they think that's all we're given. So I try to put people on a path, and so I give them this really simple model of growth. And this is how I've seen other white people, other men grow in terms of acknowledging their privilege of awareness, caring, and action. And if you're missing one of those, you kind of go astray. So if you have a lot of care and you have a lot of action, but you're low on the awareness, you're kind of like the white knight crusader gonna save the day, and you're just gonna annoy the crap out of everybody. Or if you just are aware and you just care, but you have no action, you're just kind of sitting in your room, it's kind of dry.
Lonely.
Yeah, you're not learning, you're not really learning.
Yeah, thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate that. He always takes my questions about what's it like being, and I do it. I do the same thing people do to me. What's it like being a white guy in this space? And so you always take it with such grace, and I really appreciate the framework that you use. No, really, thank you. Let's move back down the line. We're going to talk a little bit about how you enroll leadership. And let's not pretend like leaders are all ready to put resources behind something that sounds very warm and fuzzy, very squishy, doesn't add to the bottom line. Not true. McKinsey put out a ton of data that you can easily Google about how companies outperform their competition when they have diverse teams that are empowered to actually say what's on their minds, that when they're managed via inclusive culture, that the big punchline for profit is around problem identification, not even problem solving. People often lazily think, oh, well, if you got lots of people at the table, they'll be able to solve any problem. That's not what gets you. It's not what gets a company or a school in trouble. It's the problems you don't know you have. And so when you've got a diverse group of people sitting around a table who are all welcome to and empowered to say what they're thinking or what they're experiencing, you don't end up with things like the Kendall Jenner Pepsi commercial. I'm just gonna say. You can Google that one too if that's already gone. So enrolling our leadership in putting resources behind this stuff is critical. So let's start talking about Skydeck. How do you enroll leadership? You are part of leadership, so how do you enroll your peers and funders around this idea?
So I think of it in two ways. So the leadership of UC Berkeley is beautifully, wonderfully, beyond really any other institution committed to this. So in terms of the leadership of Berkeley, of which I am a part, I couldn't be in a better place. The issue that we really think about every day is how do we get the leadership of our startups to enroll in this? This is our problem that we're working on, and Patrick is helping us with workshops for men and other founders at Skydeck. Did one a few weeks ago, just with the men in the room, and we'll be doing others for the women in the room, for everybody in the room, and all the groups, because I think we all need our individual time with each other. But our challenge is to convince these young founders, young companies, they might be older founders, as I mentioned. intersectionality is an opportunity, so we have some founders that are 19 and some that are 50. But they're all young company founders, and they're racing every day to get a product out and to get a customer, and they're just frantically running to get that company moving. And we need to convince them that they need to take the time to think about their culture, because this is really part of culture. This is all about, what is my company culture like? And we're trying to figure out how to best get them in a mindset that they should, A, take some time to think about what is it to foster an inclusive culture as a startup. What do I do? What are the tools? And why should I take the time? And we've just begun this journey. I think it's going to be a series of marathons, honestly, and it's going to be very slow moving, especially with these young companies that, like I said, they've got their product out right now. So we're working on that, and I think it'll take some time for us to figure out that right formula, but I know we'll get there.
You want to take that one also?
Sure. You brought up this idea of culture too, and I think about, especially with leadership or changing mindsets, it's impossible to design behavior change, essentially, but you can design the conditions for behavior change. And the silly example I always give, like, if I want to lose weight and my husband's like, maybe you should cut carbs, I'm like, no, duh, like, I know what to do, you don't have to tell me to cut carbs. What I actually need is like someone to wake me up earlier, like all that stuff, right? And so you can't quite design the behavior change, but you can design the conditions. And so really reflecting on not just like where you want to go and why, but what's getting in the way. What's the existing culture, right? And I can, I'll share an example from IDEO. We pride ourselves on being experimental, right? And this is great. And we have, like, one of our values is learn from failure. Awesome, and yada, 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 yada. Point is, when you're trying to design things around diversity, equity, inclusion, and whether it's programs and things like that, you can't be experimental and learn from failure when it deals with someone's identity or personal trauma. And so culturally, we had people who were super passionate and wanted to just like get out there doing it in the very IDEO way. And so there's a moment of saying like, okay, that's what we're designing towards, but the conditions which we're going to use are going to feel different, right? And then how do we make it feel right in our existing culture, and et cetera. So it's not easy work, but I think identifying point A to point B and how you're going to get there, and identifying what's not working the way we are that would prevent us there is also just as important.
Would you like to take that? Yeah,
I
go
would.
ahead.
So I'm a leader in my business, but I'm also an employee of the business. And I'd like to share maybe just a slightly different perspective, kind of from the employee point of view. And one of the things that I really enjoy about T-Mobile and kind of its diversity and inclusion is these employee network groups that we have. We've got 6 employee network groups. I'm part of 2 of them, Women in Leadership and Women in Technology. And these are, they're kind of grassroots, organic organizations. And we've got probably, I think, over 20,000 employees that voluntarily join these groups. They're not required to. You don't have to do it. More than half of our workforce is in one of these 6 employee groups. And we have different forums, we have chapters in different cities, we get to meet, we have different topics that we go over. And I find that as an employee, that's really empowering. So that we've got the leadership support is one aspect of it, but that we've also got the opportunity to come together as these different communities. And there's a chapter in Los Angeles, that's where I'm based. And when we have our Women in Technology meetings, more men are part of the Women in Technology group and come to the meetings than women. And that's okay, that's great actually, so that we get to talk about topics. So I think there's 2 ways I think that you can do it, not necessarily always top down. I think that's really important. But there's also an opportunity kind of from the grassroots up as well.
Thank you. Those are very thoughtful answers. I'm going to go off script. You're probably shocked to find that out. Can you tell? For those of you who took my class, yeah, there's no script. 3 women on the panel. I have noticed that you all, and I felt it when you did it, mentioned our bodies. And with all of the differences among groups of women that we have across race, across age, one thing continues to be true, and that is that women are wrestling with our bodies. Be it because you uphold a beauty standard, you don't uphold a beauty standard, you're afraid of what you look like standing in front of a group giving a presentation, you're afraid of somebody looking at you, you're afraid of what you wore, you're afraid of what you didn't wear. I'm afraid my lipstick's gonna smudge, but it's Fenty, so Rihanna has come through. But I was so glad. I've been finding lately that there are these places where there's an opportunity for conversation, and we're in this wonderful room with brilliant people, mostly women, but not entirely. Can we talk a little bit about how our bodies have become our enemies? Unless we've done a lot of work around this, a lot of work. And if you haven't read the book Hunger by Roxane Gay, I don't care what gender you are, you'll clap for Roxane Gay for sure. I said Rihanna and Roxane Gay in like the same 2 breaths, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to heaven now. If you have not read the book Hunger, and for those of you who have struggled with eating, who have struggled with your body, just know it's a rough book to read. It took me probably, it's a quick read, but it probably took me 2 months to finish because I could kind of only do like 5 pages at a time. Can we talk a little bit about where your body has worked for you and not worked for you in that intersection with being a woman in your professional life? And then I would love to hear from Patrick about how you witnessed this in your relationships with women, in your your friendships with women, your coworkers. Because I would love for us to talk about this more. It's one of the universals that I keep finding that crosses everything. So I don't know, that's putting you on the spot a lot, but I don't know if anybody's compelled. Martha, you brought it up.
I brought it up
first, so I'm just looking at you like, come through, Martha.
Yes. And it's interesting because this was actually a conversation point between my daughter, who graduated from Berkeley 3 years ago. Yes. Woo.
Go Bears.
And you know, we were talking about intersectionality, and we brought up the issue of body image, right? And that it's one of the things that we know it's a real thing, but we don't talk about it. We won't talk about it. And she actually said, I bet you it won't come up. And she said, and I don't think, Mom, you'll have the courage to talk about it either.
Well, guess what? Let's get her on the
I
phone.
know.
You FaceTime
I'm going to tell her when I go
here.
back. I think I'm going to shock her a little bit.
Yeah, do it.
It's a real thing, I think. And it's not, it's all kinds of body images, right? I don't think hardly any woman escapes having those thoughts. And I think the worst thing about it is how much energy it sucks out of you, right? Mentally, and the amount of time that you spend worrying about that you don't give that mental energy, you can't give that mental energy to something else. And it just erodes your confidence as well, which is, I think, so debilitating. As I've gotten older, I think I'm not over everything, right? But I think I've gotten better at managing those thoughts and still being able to come across with confidence that doesn't define me. It's part of my experience, but it doesn't define me, and I've got so much more to offer than just that. But it's a real thing, and I think it is something that we need to be a little bit more courageous maybe about talking about.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for setting that conversation topic off, because you cued me early on, so thank you. I really appreciate that. Do you want to take a shot at it?
Yeah, I'll never forget. I got a piece of advice, and I got it from 2 different women at 2 different points, or maybe 5 years apart. But essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was the same thing. It was at some point, Virginia, you're going to be, women are too young, and you're not taken seriously in the workplace, or you're seen as too old, and you're just ignored. And I was like, okay, so when's that sweet spot? And it's like you.
40
okay,
to 40.
thank you.
Yeah, my
I'm
40s are dope.
All right. And I find it also very, so there's the age thing I think a lot about and how I show up, and I also thought about when I really, really wanted to double down on my career was also the time that I wanted to start a family. And I had a huge identity crisis around this is kind of related to body image, but am I a mom? Am I not a mom? I'm a boss lady. All of that is really real. I still go through it quite a bit, and trying to be all things at all times is impossible. But Yeah, no, I think about this a lot. For me, mostly it's like how I represent my age. I find myself rounding up, like I'm turning 39, but I'm like, oh, I'm almost 40. And like, that shouldn't matter. I shouldn't have to say that on a panel. I shouldn't have to say that at work, but for whatever reason, because I felt like I'm being clumped in with like, I don't know. And it's probably all in my head that I'm not being taken seriously because I got that piece of advice. I think about how I dress for meetings a lot. Yeah, I think about it a lot.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
So thanks for bringing up this topic because it's really important. As I said earlier, one of the great things about getting older is giving way fewer. And
We're going out there.
I'm really trying to be honest with myself, and I get up, I care about how I look, I wash my hair, I put on makeup, you know, I spend quite a bit of money at the colorist. But she's great if you need a recommendation. Wait, wrong comment.
Not at all. We're all worried about that.
But once I'm done with that, unlike when I was younger, I leave the house and I don't think about it during the day. And I'm at this point the happiest I've been with my look than I've ever been in my life. And I really wish that I could have told my younger self, stop worrying so much about it. If there's any way that we women who have reached much more comfortableness with ourselves can communicate that and inspire younger women to feel that. There we go. There's a Burma lady up there. Gosh, I'm thinking about that now. What a great thing we could do about that. I will say that I do know that there's a lot we can do at any age to support each other, right? To give each other props. Hey, girl, you look great, right? And do that with everybody. And then here's a really interesting thing. I was sitting here thinking, well, you know, I really don't care. I go about my day. I'm feeling really good about myself. I'm really not worried about the things I used to worry about. And then I remembered I had a dream last night. And in the dream, somebody told me I was too thin. This is something I've gotten many, many times in my life from women. And it said with disdain. And it always hurt when women said that. And it's just, I just had the dream last night. It was a man who said it in the dream. But
Anybody got a couch?
I do not know what this is about, honestly. But man, woman, it doesn't. That's been said to me many times, and it always hurts. So I guess that stuff is still there.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, something that we can all do. And women do that. You know, we'll go out for girls' night. We'll have a great time, and we'll tell each other we look great. Let's just try to do that as much as possible in a world where we don't get that from everybody else.
Well said, well said.
Can I build really quickly? And I just want to build on all this because, again, going back to the presentation right before us, is that it's less about, I think it's a lot in my head, but it's like I feel gaslighted sometimes. I don't know if people know that term, but like I leave feeling like I'm not being taken seriously, I'm not feeling heard. So then I start thinking, what is it? Is it because I'm a woman or is it my age? And so going back to that intersectionality, and I don't know. The thing is, like, at the end of the day, I don't know what it was, but those are assumptions I'm making, and then I'm like, well, what's within my control? I can dress in all black. I don't know, this is silly. But like, whatever. But it's because I'm trying to figure out, like, get that validation and that I'm not going crazy in those moments.
That's right. And I want to point out something right now, because we are all very good at using our head and hammering away at problems. If you're in this room, you've probably gotten very good at that, at using your brain that is an excellent tool / weapon, and this is how you win, this is how you win, this is how you win. And as we talk about things that are a little more like out of your head and into your heart, you feel it in your stomach, right? I can feel my voice kind of like, that's the struggle we still have being women in professional spaces. That's how it actually comes up. And I feel like I haven't always been honest, especially with groups of young women, about what's still hard versus, oh no, don't worry about that anymore. Like, we've got that on lock. Just go to the women's bathroom, start crying, someone will come in, they'll help you, you'll figure out who you're supposed to talk to. Oh, that guy over there, everybody knows he's an asshole. Don't go over there. So-and-so's working on getting him fired. Let's talk about something else. Like, that stuff, like those things are, in some ways, we've made a lot faster progress on them, but the stuff that we then help do to ourselves is the stuff we still are struggling with. Where we're like, you know, that's the like ultimate colonization. It's like, oh, you're in my head, right? And I thought today, I'm gonna show up looking hella Mexican. That's what I'm gonna do. At first I was like, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna put on jeans and I'm just gonna be really comfortable. I'm gonna be like, eh. And then I was like, no, I'm 46 and I wanna come up a little distinguished and I teach there. So and then I'm like, ooh, plus Mexican. And so,
Have you thought about stand-up comedy for
I-
a side gig?
I have thought about it. So anyway, no. But if we're honest with each other, this is when it comes up. Does my ass look big? And is that good? Because one of the things that's happening as we diversify our culture, our popular culture, is my curves are now worth something that they weren't worth 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 20 years ago. And so as Lizzo stands in front of the world on Two Dope Queens, if you haven't seen it, playing the flute and twerking. If you have not seen Lizzo, she's not on your radar, Lizzo, she's an amazing singer, dancer, etc., flautist. Before Lizzo, there were a lot of us just sitting there thinking, I'm too brown, I'm too fat, I'm too short, I'm too Mexican. The list goes on, and it's not fair. And one of the things that I've loved about working on diversity is as we get more of each other, we go, that body is great, that body, you look great. Oh my gosh, we can do that now. We have to do that together. That's where the allyship is gonna come. When we talk about the things that hurt us all, that's really gonna come. I completely skipped over you, Patrick, and that was not a slight in any way, because you know that I love you. I am, as usual, really curious to hear a man's perspective on this conversation. No, I mean that! No!
Let me speak for all
Wait,
men.
no. Let me go back. I am completely
We know that's
honest.
not what you meant.
Okay.
We know that's not what you meant.
Okay.
We're all in love with you. It's fine.
Thank you.
Well, the first thing I thought of, the thing that I'm thinking of right now is when I become conscious of like really practical things, like if I'm going to go meet a friend and she's a black woman, I can just like throw in a t-shirt and a pair of jeans and like whatever, like it's easy. It takes me like 3 minutes. And I think about some of my friends and it takes them a hell of a lot longer. And for me, there's just like the wider knowing of what others have to do that I don't have to do in order to like be accepted in our society. And then there's also the like, what can I do to respect the fact that they have to do that? Like, what can I do to like be more presentable, like to respect them in that way? Mm-hmm. That's a thought that I have sometimes. Yeah. One thought on like men and self-consciousness. To me, there's no doubt at all that women in our society are valued way more on their appearance than our men, like no question, especially in professional settings. And also, I kind of think our society really does, from age 0, to get ourselves to hate our bodies no matter who we are. And I saw there's somebody who did research on like Google searches, and he found that like both men and women were like equally likely to Google like, am I fat? Or like, how do I do X, Y, and Z? And I think there's an element of like men are never gonna talk about it because it's against the masculine code, but I think there is a lot of self-hate, but that doesn't translate to being disadvantaged in the workplace to like any degree that is for women, like no question. And I would say that personal safety and appearance are things that men are always shocked at the amount of time and attention that women like put on those things, because generally speaking, we just don't, like maybe we're insecure, but we don't have to do anything or think about it in the same way.
Yeah. And lest this stay too binary, I'm the mom of 2 genderqueer kids, both of whom use they, them pronouns. And the additional, again, bring in another intersectional, sort of another identity, the additional burden of needing to mark to other individuals what you are on that binary is another entire burden that gets completely discounted and is only now starting to be talked about in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, that We're only now, because I run a consultancy, we're only now able to see companies when we say, all right, on your demographic thing, you only have M or F. Do you understand that as millennials take their rightful place and Gen Z's coming after them, these little boxes are going to look silly? And we're just now at the very beginning of seeing companies go, oh my gosh, you're right. Whereas even 5 years ago, people would look at me like, that's not a thing. And then now we're to a point where they're like, yes, because my child, I know, my kid's best friend, we just hired somebody, and we have to learn a whole new language about respecting the bodies of people who are trying to be outside this very restrictive binary that has been thrust on all of us. And even day to day. So I see my 16-year-old and 19-year-old who are traveling somewhere on that spectrum, and it moves, but people want them to pick a spot. You're a girl, you're a boy, what are you? And the idea that it could move day to day, just like the way I feel about my body could move day to day, to a lesser degree. But am I too brown? Am I too short? Am I too fat? Am I too masculine? Am I too? And the amount of energy, I think you said it right. Do you want to know what's going to thwart your career? You want to know what's going to make you not achieve your dreams? You talking yourself out of it over and over, and you saying, oh, thanks. And you saying, I was told I was too, whatever that hurtful word is, or not enough, whatever that hurtful word is. And you may never be it. You may never be it. I recently said to myself, you know, you're never going to be thin. Like, I was given this body. This one's never going to be thin unless I really hurt myself. I don't really want to do that. I also really like my life, so I like this. I'm going to keep it for a while, and I'm going to start to get more comfortable talking about it and realizing how it shows up in the way I show up to do the work of expanding the definition of what it means to be human, and thereby building systems that can hold all 7 billion of us. Because that's what I'm ultimately trying to do. That's what we're ultimately trying to do. I think I'm going to take this point and go to questions. I don't know where we are with time, but I think it's time for questions. I would love to hear your thoughts. I see so many like, yes, so anything anybody said, go for it. I saw your hand go up, so do you want to shout? Awesome. Okay, great. Yes.
How do we build those safe spaces and allow that space to grow to then open that circle?
Yes, that's a great question. It is. I have ideas, but I'd love to open it up to the panel first.
Formal and informal spaces. So a formal space is where people of a certain group are in the room together only with each other. And that is a formal thing at every institution. So hopefully, at Skydeck someday we have pitch practice and groups for women of color, for everything, right? We'll get there. And the second is informal. So having my staff talk about these issues and make sure that we're all looking for those opportunities, we're all looking for issues that might spring up. We're making it very clear to the startups there that we want to listen if they have an issue. We have a team doctor on call. She's one of our advisors, and we tell everybody, you got a sticky, wicked issue. You either talk to Hillary or you talk to me, and they will sometimes come and do that. We try our best. We want to hear from every group how we can do it better.
Nice, thanks. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I can build. So, and I think to your point, it's like, what's the chicken and egg? We have an ERG at IDEO called Brown Sugar, and there's a lot of people who, allies that want to get involved. And I think there's also respecting that space, and then maybe having so whatever rituals they are. If we meet weekly, is it monthly or quarterly that we have a bigger event that includes allies, right? But allowing those Slack channels to be private, those meetings to be kept, and allowing that space. I think it's got to be respect on both sides, and so just making sure that you make time for those bigger events, but it doesn't have to happen as often.
That's great. Let's go in the back.
I had a question for you, Virginia. You talked about how being a white-skinned Latina has affected you. So similarly, I've been in that situation. I'm half Mexican, half Chilean, but a lot of people don't look at me and think that. So it's one thing to kind of receive that code switching from strangers, but what do you do when maybe family and friends kind of feel that way around you because you don't really think that they'll look at you differently, and how do you kind of tackle that situation?
No, I actually, I was just in New York last week, and I was hanging out with my cousins and my brother, and, you know, and we like go in and out, like my first language is Spanish. So for one, we're like going in and out of English and Spanish, and people probably at other tables like look at us like, what the heck is going on? And, you know, you get us together, one song comes on, it's a dance party, regardless of where we are. And so I think there's that, we definitely as a family like are there, because I think we have shared experiences. Now when we go to South America to visit family, we're the Americans. And you know, whatever, but then you get, again, you put on some music and we all start dancing. So it kind of figures itself out. And so I think with family, it's not, I haven't experienced it as much. But with friends even, I think it's well-meaning, but I don't have an answer for you other than like, I'm being more bold the older I get. And it's not that I never had, I've always had pride, but I almost like didn't have the energy to get into those conversations sometimes. So sometimes I still don't. But when I want to pick a battle, you know, and push back, I feel more bold, more confident. But I don't know if I have exactly advice. You're going to have to feel those moments of when you want to reserve your energy or use it, and you'll sense that.
Yeah. Let's go to who has the microphone now. Let's go up here.
Thank you all for sharing. This will be a weird question, so just a heads up. Do you think there's any disadvantage of talking too much about D&I?
Do we think there's any
disadvantage
disadvantage
for talking too much about D&I? Because I'm here because topics are very relevant. I'm Chinese. I was born in China, grew up in China. I came here 6 years ago for school, and I found a job with a PR agency. So today, when I look at the slide, the 9 identities, I realize, oh my God, that's me. I'm a woman. I'm Asian for a while in the legal status. English is not my first language, right? So 5 years ago, when I tried to look for a job in the States, I had no idea of what is D&I, and I have the courage to go for it. Today, after this session, I feel like, wow, I'm educated now. I have the awareness of knowing how challenging it would be. I probably won't do the same thing as what I did 5 years ago. And I know there's a concept out there that the best D&I is when we don't talk about the topic anymore in corporate America, right? So what is your guys' vision in terms of what is the best way for, you know, to guide people like me to really thrive?
I love this question. That's a great question. Do you want to start?
I do think the way we talk about DEI mostly is U.S.-centric and often sometimes Bay-centric. We hear this a lot.
Also what?
Bay Area-centric
Okay,
sometimes, you know, like, so we can create our own bubbles. Even in this conversation of what is diversity, equity, inclusion, we still need empathy to understand that it might look different in Chicago than it looks in New York, than it looks in Shanghai, than it looks in Tokyo, and we can't just clump everything together. So I don't think, I hope there's no, like, we're talking about it too much, but I do think there are different ways to talk about it, and doing enough research to have the conversation a smart way and meet people where they are.
Yeah, I never want to talk somebody into having an experience they're not having, right? To say, well, you appear a certain way, therefore you must be having a certain experience. That's just not that doesn't make sense to me. What I want to do for all people who are working together is explain what's going on around them. So even if you're not experiencing it, you now are aware and attuned and go, oh, that might be happening right now, because then you can be helpful. Then you can be a champion for something. Then you can be a resource for somebody. Then you can be the one who calls it out. If it's not feeling a certain way to you, you don't have to talk yourself into it. So I think that's another important thing to remember. Did anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah,
I think it's a great question.
You made the point I think I wanted to make. I'd add, I don't think that there can be too much conversation. I don't think so. You're going to hear about courageous conversations a little bit later, and that's, no, I don't think so. That doesn't mean that's the right answer for everybody, but I don't think that there can be too much of it. I think you don't have to necessarily, participate in all of it all of the time. I think that's a personal choice of how much you want to participate in that. And as you said, I think it's how it resonates with you. Your experience may be different. But I really like what you said about, I think it helps us have empathy for what somebody else's experience may be like. And it may not have been the same as yours. So I like that.
Do I have time for one more question? Oh, wait. Oh, okay, one more question. Up there, there's a microphone ready to go. Last question. Sorry, shoot.
So I wanted to hear your thoughts about, we were talking at lunch about how there are usually more women than men at these kinds of conferences. I went to Grace Hopper 2 years ago. There were like 16,000 women and 2,000 men. So how do is there something that we can design differently about conferences to make men feel incentivized to come and participate in these discussions? And then the second thing I've been thinking about was a stat that I read a few years ago that the suicide rate for men is higher than women.
Yes.
And a lot of it might be due to the pressures that men feel. So what kinds of conversations can we have with men so they feel less pressure, or there's more opportunity for women to be equal partners in the workforce?
Well, Patrick, when you were a student, this is literally what you took on. You wanna?
Yeah, and I work with MBA programs actually around the world on their male allyship initiatives to try to get men more involved in self-awareness and education. A lot of them want to do how do we get more men to show up to the WIL conference kind of question, and I think that the goal behind that question is how can men become more aware of these things and become better allies and understand their blind spots better. My own personal take in terms of what I've seen has been the most effective is that I don't think just bringing them necessarily to a conference like this will help them. Some of them it will, but a lot of them need more, just in terms of what I've seen is effective, they need more hands-on tailored work. A lot of guys would show up here and just have no idea what was being said or how it related to them. And so the work that I do is a lot of translation, honestly. I'm not an expert, but I have enough background and I spend enough time that I can translate these things into words that men understand better.
So he's really good at it too. I've seen him. Thank you. Martha, Virginia, Caroline, Patrick, thank you so much. Thank you to the organizers for this event.